First, let's start with this case. I never expected my relationship with my sister to completely fall apart over a dress. But here I am, wondering if I could have handled things differently, or if she was just unreasonable from the start. My sister has always had expensive taste. Growing up, she would only wear name-brand clothes, demand the latest gadgets, and act like she was above everyone who didn't have the same lifestyle. The problem is, our parents couldn't afford to give her the kind of life she wanted. I remember a time when they scraped together what little they had to buy her a designer bag she begged for, only for her to whine that it was last season's model. Meanwhile, I learned early on that if I wanted something nice, I had to work for it. That mindset stuck with me into adulthood. I worked hard, put myself through college, and eventually landed a high-paying job. I wouldn't say I live lavishly, but I'm comfortable. I've saved up, invested wisely, and made sure I have financial stability. My sister, on the other hand, never really grew out of her entitled mindset. She went through multiple jobs, never sticking with one for too long, and relied heavily on our parents to bail her out whenever she got into financial trouble. When she got engaged, she immediately started planning the kind of wedding that only someone with unlimited funds could afford. It was clear she had no idea how she was going to pay for it. But that didn't stop her from booking a high-end venue, searching for designer decorations, and making a guest list that was completely over the top. Then came the dress. She found a dress she claimed was the one. It was a designer gown with a ridiculous price tag, $10,000. She didn't have the money for it, but instead of looking for a cheaper option, she decided that I, her older sibling with a good job, should pay for it. She didn't ask me, she told me. She made it seem like it was my duty as family to provide this for her, like it was the least I could do since I was fortunate enough to afford it. The truth is, I could afford it. But why would I? It wasn't my wedding. It wasn't my responsibility. I told her no, and she acted like I had personally ruined her life. She threw a fit, crying and screaming about how I was selfish and heartless. She accused me of not caring about her happiness and claimed I was just hoarding my money instead of helping family. I told her she could get a beautiful dress without spending that much, but she refused to listen. She insisted that she deserved this one because it was her dream dress, and anything less would make her look cheap. When she realized I wasn't budging, she switched tactics. She started trashing me to everyone in the family and beyond. She told relatives that I was greedy and cruel. She told friends that I refused to help her because I looked down on her. She even posted on social media about how I was abandoning her during the most important moment of her life. But the thing is, our family knows her. They've seen how entitled she's been her whole life, how she always expects others to foot the bill for her extravagant tastes. So they sided with me. No one pressured me to give in. In fact, most of them were disgusted by her behavior. Some even called her out directly, telling her she was being ridiculous. That's when things got worse. She doubled down, accusing everyone of betraying her. She threw insults at anyone who told her she was wrong, calling them jealous and fake. She refused to accept that maybe, just maybe, she was being unreasonable. Eventually, people got fed up with her. One by one, they started pulling out of the wedding. First our cousins, then some close family friends. Even our parents, who have always been softer on her than she deserves, told her they wouldn't support this kind of behavior. By the time the wedding day arrived, barely anyone showed up. It wasn't the grand, luxurious event she had envisioned. From what I heard, she was furious, blaming me for everything. In her mind, if I had just given her what she wanted, none of this would have happened. Now, months later, she still refuses to speak to me. She acts like I'm the villain in her story, the evil older sibling who crushed her dreams. But honestly, I don't regret standing my ground. I worked hard to get where I am, and I won't let anyone guilt me into throwing money away just because they think they're entitled to it. So, am I the bad guy for refusing to buy my sister's overpriced wedding dress? Let's start judging. Not the bad guy. Your sister sounds unbelievably entitled. Just because you have a good job doesn't mean you owe her a luxury dress. She tried to manipulate you, then went full-on tantrum when it didn't work. Her behavior is why her wedding was empty, not your refusal to be her personal bank. You're not in the wrong. Your sister isn't just entitled, she's delusional. It's one thing to hope a sibling might offer a small contribution, but demanding a $10,000 dress? Then trying to ruin your reputation when you rightfully say no? That's on her. Everyone is in the wrong. Your sister is obviously wrong for demanding money and throwing a fit, but I wonder if there was a way to de-escalate things before it got to the point where no one attended her wedding. Maybe you could have handled it more delicately, instead of outright refusing. Next up, I work at a small but busy office. The pay isn't great, but it's enough to cover my bills, and I don't mind the work itself. My manager, Rebecca, is the kind of boss that makes people dread coming in. She's been with the company for years and acts like she owns the place. She plays favorites, gives herself all the credit for our work, and makes sure we know that we're all replaceable. For a while, I managed to stay under her radar. I showed up on time, did my job, and went home. But a few months ago, things started to change. She began demanding that I stay late after hours to help the team. At first, it was small, an extra 30 minutes here, an extra hour there. She made it sound like a favor, saying things like, "We all have to make sacrifices." I assumed I'd be paid for it, so I stayed. But when I got my paycheck, the extra hours weren't there. I brought it up to her thinking it was just an oversight. She immediately brushed me off and said overtime wasn't in the budget. I asked why she didn't mention that before, and she gave me some excuse about everyone needing to do their part to keep things running smoothly. She ended the conversation by saying I should be grateful to have a job in this economy. I let it go that time, but then it kept happening. She started scheduling me for unpaid overtime regularly, sometimes several hours a week. Whenever I tried to push back, she made it clear that refusing wasn't an option. She used intimidation tactics, making comments about how there were plenty of people who would kill for my position. She even hinted that I wasn't a team player like some of my coworkers, implying that if I didn't comply, I wouldn't last long. I knew this wasn't right, but I needed my job. So for a while, I stayed quiet. Then one day, she scheduled me for an entire Saturday, completely unpaid. That was the final straw. I told her straight up that I wasn't working for free anymore. She looked at me like I had just insulted her personally. Her whole attitude changed in an instant. She went from fake nice to furious. She told me that if I refused, I would be making a big mistake. She made it sound like I was sabotaging my own career, like I'd never get another job if I didn't prove my dedication now. Then she went even further and outright said that I could be replaced if I didn't get with the program. I don't know if she expected me to cave, but I was done. I went straight to human resources and reported everything. I told them about the unpaid overtime, the threats, and how she had been forcing employees to work off the clock. I expected them to brush it off, maybe give her a warning at best. But they took it seriously. It turned out I wasn't the only one who had complained. Other employees had come forward before, but nothing was ever done because Rebecca always managed to talk her way out of trouble. This time, though, my report was the final push they needed to dig deeper. And that's when they found something bigger. Rebecca wasn't just forcing employees to work unpaid hours. She had also been stealing from the company. She had been manipulating payroll records, pocketing money that should have gone to bonuses and expense reimbursements. She had been doing it for years, but since she had so much control over the office, nobody had noticed until HR started looking into her. Once they had enough evidence, they didn't waste any time. She was called into a meeting with upper management, and within an hour, security was escorting her out of the building. She didn't even get a chance to clear out her desk herself. They had someone else do it for her. The whole office was in shock. Some people had suspected she was shady, but nobody expected her to go down like that. The company ended up making changes after she was gone, including hiring a new manager and putting stricter policies in place to prevent this kind of thing from happening again. As for me, I kept my job. In fact, I actually got a small raise a few months later. I never got an official thank you from the company, but I know my report played a part in getting rid of her. Now, some people think I was right to report her, but others have said I should have just kept my head down. A few of my coworkers even told me that I should have just played along until I found a new job instead of risking everything. So was I wrong for reporting her? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. She was breaking the law. You didn't just protect yourself, you protected your coworkers too. She got exactly what she deserved. Everyone sucks. She was clearly in the wrong, but you only reported her when it affected you. Other employees had been dealing with this for a long time. You're in the wrong. You could have just looked for another job instead of going straight to HR. Now you've probably made your workplace more stressful for everyone. Next up, when I bought my house a few years ago, I never imagined my biggest issue would be my next-door neighbor. She's a woman in her 50s who has lived in the neighborhood for decades and acts like she owns the entire block. At first, I thought she was just being friendly. The first time I saw her using my lawn, I didn't make a big deal about it. She had placed a couple of chairs near my tree and was sitting there with a drink. I assumed she just wanted some shade and figured it wasn't worth making a fuss over. Then it happened again, and again. Soon I'd come home from work and see her entire patio set on my lawn, along with a small grill. She would invite people over like it was part of her yard. She never asked for permission. She just acted like this was normal. I tried reasoning with her, but she brushed me off. She told me that before I moved in, the previous owner never minded. According to her, this meant she had some kind of permanent right to my yard. I reminded her that the house belonged to me now, and she needed to stop using my lawn. She rolled her eyes and told me I was being unreasonable. It didn't stop. In fact, it got worse. She started leaving things on my lawn all the time, folding chairs, a table, even a kiddie pool at one point. One weekend I woke up to the sound of loud music and the smell of grilled food. She had set up an entire barbecue party on my lawn. Strangers were lounging in my yard like they owned the place. That was the final straw. I called a fencing company and arranged to have a tall wooden fence installed along the property line. It wasn't cheap, but I figured it was the only way to get some peace. The day the fence went up, she acted like I had personally insulted her. She stormed over, demanding to know why I was putting up a fence and saying I was ruining the community feel of the neighborhood. I told her that it was my property, and I was tired of her treating it like it was hers. She didn't like that answer. I thought the fence would solve the problem, but I underestimated how entitled she was. A few days after the fence was installed, I came home to find parts of it damaged. At first, I thought maybe it was an accident or bad weather, but then I checked my security cameras. There she was, trying to pry the wooden panels off with some kind of tool. I confronted her about it, but she denied everything. When I mentioned the camera footage, she went quiet for a second, then started yelling about how I was being a bad neighbor. She said I was turning the street into a hostile place. I told her that if she touched my fence again, I'd get the authorities involved. She must have thought I was bluffing because a few nights later, I caught her trying to tear it down again. This time, I didn't even bother confronting her. I called the police. When the officers arrived, she played the victim, claiming she was just fixing the fence. She tried to act like she was doing me a favor, but the footage was clear. She was actively trying to remove the panels. The officers warned her that she was trespassing and damaging private property. She argued, but in the end they gave her a fine and told her to stay off my property. Now she refuses to speak to me. She glares at me every time she sees me outside. She's also been spreading rumors around the neighborhood, telling people that I'm unfriendly and ruining the sense of community. A few neighbors have given me dirty looks, but honestly, I don't care. So, am I the bad guy for putting up a fence and calling the police on my neighbor? Let's start judging. Not the bad guy. She had no right to treat your yard like it was hers. She ignored your boundaries, damaged your property, and then played the victim when she got caught. You handled this better than most people would have. You're not in the wrong. She got what she deserved. The fact that she tried to tear down the fence shows how entitled she is. You did the right thing by getting the police involved. Everyone is in the wrong. Your neighbor is obviously wrong for trespassing and damaging your fence, but I wonder if you could have handled it differently. Maybe you should have had a firm discussion before putting up the fence.